Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have with me the Asus Vivobook GO 15 OLED. Let's give it a review to get to know it completely. Let's get started. This computer has a launch price in Mexico of 15,999 pesos. That is to say, it is located in a kind of mid-range, low-mid perhaps, but it can offer us a good performance. In fact, we will get to know it throughout the video, but the most outstanding feature is in its name because it integrates an OLED screen, which is not very common in laptops. By the way, on the screen you saw that this price is more or less $910 to give you an idea, but remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. What do you think if you join me below to learn all about it? This computer is made entirely of plastic, so it does not stand out in materials and is available in 3 colors. The one I have in my hands is cool silver. It is also available in mixed black and gray-green. In this case, despite being a plastic finish, it is highly reflective to simply give it a metallic look, although I remind you that it does not integrate metal as a material. It has a weight of 1.63 kilograms, so we could say that it is relatively light. And its maximum thickness is 17.9 millimeters, so I think it's comfortable to carry in your backpack and it's not really very cumbersome or heavy. Something you should know is that it is not able to open with one hand. As you will notice, it is necessary to have the base with one hand to be able to make the opening, so it does not have such an advanced hinge. But what you will notice very advanced is that it does manage to open up to 180 degrees. So in this sense, it does give us an experience of use that may be different depending on your modes of use. But it is definitely something positive that it gets to open up to this angle, this hinge. As you can see at the bottom, we also find a plastic cover with a grill for all ventilation, as it does integrate fans that, by the way, are not very noisy and also reach to see around some other cooling systems that brings integrated. Then this can definitely be a positive point because the cooling is good without making much noise. It also comes with these orange rubber feet so that the computer can have some relief or height when it is on the table and can circulate the air in a better way. I hope that the non-premium materials do not deceive you because this computer has very good durability. According to Asus, has military certification, so it withstands falls, withstands abuse, also supports extreme weather and other conditions. Then I think it is a computer built of good quality. Obviously, it is not for you to be throwing it constantly, but in an accident, you can be a little more confident that it will have more likely to survive. Something you should also note is that it doesn't have an easy slot to access RAM or storage, although it does have screws that can be removed without any problem. The keyboard will also be a point of quality. It should be noted that it does have numeric keypad, so for accounting tasks or some other uses where you require a lot of numbers can be quite useful. So it takes advantage of the key layout very well. The only thing I personally do not like is that the enter key is a little smaller than normal, as it usually comes in the form of inverted L, but in this case it is only a key at the bottom. Typing is going to be quite comfortable since they offer us 1.4 millimeters of travel, so the pressure of the keys is really very comfortable. It is a keyboard that will give you a useful experience when you are typing. In fact, its keys are slightly concave so that the fingers also accommodate in a more comfortable way. And as you can see, the power button is integrated inside the keyboard. That is something that I personally do not like so much, but it does have some special function keys. For example, we have a key to directly launch the screen clipping tool in Windows, which can be quite useful, and it is a backlit keyboard, so it offers us 3 different levels of brightness so that you as a user choose which is the most appropriate level when you are using this computer at night or in low light conditions. Through the camera, it is a little difficult to show this backlit keyboard, but I assure you that it works well. I think that at this angle is where this lighting is most noticeable, so it is white. You cannot customize absolutely nothing of the lights because it is not a computer for gamers. The trackpad is quite simple, only a standard size of 5 inches in its diagonal. The click also feels very simple with a considerably high noise, although it does support gestures with 2 fingers to scroll or also slide horizontally or even change desktop with several fingers. Then the support for gesture recognition is very good, but it is a simple trackpad for the size and click. Regarding connectivity, note that on the left side comes with a USB-A connector 2.0 that is a fairly simple connector, and here are some indicator LEDs, but on the right side comes with a few more connectors. To start, we find the power connector followed by the HDMI connector to connect to an external monitor or a projector. Then we will find a USB-A port 3.2 Gen 1, so this is much faster than the left port, and then the surprise is that it does integrate a USB-C port, which is also 3.2 Gen 1, offering good transfer speeds, and finally the 3.5mm connector for headphones or microphone or both. As you notice, there is no integrated SD card reader, just for your consideration. And while we're on the subject of connectivity, you should know that it has support for Wi-Fi 6M networks, so that's pretty good. Although performance may vary, remember that I do have a Wi-Fi 6 router in this case, and in my first test it did not reach a very attractive speed. In the second test it suddenly reached some peaks and then suddenly it didn't. So I don't think it's a very attractive speed, so it does not seem to me that it is an ultra high download speed, but the speed seems to me that it goes according to the price. I could not demand much more. In fact, it will work well, only that when you hear Wi-Fi 6E, one imagines that the computer will support even more download speed. But to finish with the topic of connectivity, you should also know that it supports Bluetooth 5.3, so it will offer very good support for accessories such as headphones to have good audio stability. And as I anticipated from the beginning, the screen is one of its most spectacular points because it is an OLED screen with 15.6 inches in its diagonal, so it is a relatively large screen. Its ratio is 16:9, so I think it is totally focused on the consumption of multimedia content because the screen will be used in its entirety when playing a video. However, for work, you might find the vertical space a little short, but that's up to you as a user. Its resolution is Full HD 1920 by 1080 pixels and reaches a density of 141 pixels per inch, so it is not so spectacular in the level of detail. Small text may possibly reveal the pixels of this screen. It is not spectacular in that sense, but in the saturation of colors and even in the viewing angles because it can maintain a good view from the side. It should only be noted that your screen can generate some reflections that can become slightly annoying. It is nothing that I consider exaggeratedly serious, but you should be aware of it. The screen achieves 400 nits of brightness, so it is focused on indoor use and is 60 Hz. But another advantage of having an OLED screen is that it has 70% less blue light compared to other IPS screens. So it's a screen that's much less tiring on your eyes. And in fact, you see how it has several modes. For example, we can lower the brightness to a relatively very low level for very comfortable use in very dark situations or at night. And it even still has a higher dimming setting, which would allow us to make the screen almost look like it's turned off. So if you are one of those people who work a lot at night and don't want to strain your eyesight, this is an excellent choice. Similarly, in the settings of this screen, we can find various color settings in case you want to enjoy a little more natural colors or a little more intense, or even manually, you could set the balance you want the screen to have in color, and it also has a visual rest mode to further reduce the emission of blue light for comfortable viewing. So I think everywhere you look at it, the screen is its strongest point with ease. And if you're worried that because it's an OLED screen you might get burn-in or image burn-in, Asus incorporates good protection measures. For starters, it has activated an option to launch a screensaver with an animation every so often in case you leave the static content. It also has an option to easily hide the Windows taskbar so that it is not always displayed on the screen to prevent it from being marked. And finally, it easily includes a setting to enable or disable transparency. The right thing to do would be to keep the transparency and even make it hide automatically if you want to be very careful with this screen that could get marked by its OLED technology. The computer integrates stereo sound. So it has two speakers, but they are located at the bottom. And the truth is that I do not like it, because when the sound bounces on the table, the middle frequencies are increased. So it is not an audio that stands out in quality. The sound, I would say, is regular, although very similar to the vast majority of laptops on the market. What do you think if we listen to a small test? Although remember that it's not the same as listening to it live. And to customize your sound experience, Asus includes a collaboration with DTS. So it comes with some surround sound presets that you can select so that the sound can adapt a little bit to your stereo experience. And it also has a graphic equalizer, although it's only a 5-band equalizer, so it's pretty simple, but fortunately there is the option to customize your audio experience. And interestingly, within the options of the My Asus application, it also has an artificial intelligence filter, which would allow you to remove noise to hear only the voices. This could be very useful in video calls, where the other person has a very noisy environment, although it will obviously consume more battery. And speaking of noise reduction with respect to microphones, we will also find options to capture audio in different ways. For example, we can capture a 360 audio, also a more directional recording mode, also an authentic recording without any kind of modification, or a noise cancellation mode, which again could be useful if you're in a fairly noisy environment. Then also the audio pickup should be of good quality. Below you will hear some audio recorded with this computer's microphones in the authentic audio setting.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con los micrófonos de esta computadora Asus Vivobook GO 15 OLED.
The camera on this computer is pretty simple. It only gives us HD video output for video calls, so it's pretty basic. The only thing to note here is that it comes with a completely physical cover, so you can be 100% sure that absolutely nothing is going to show through that camera. That's something that a lot of people are increasingly concerned about. So, if you want to have as more peace of mind, there's this cover that also features an orange background, so it's very easy to distinguish.
Este sería el resultado con una iluminación directa. Estoy parado enfrente de la ventana, así que la iluminación es muy elevada y en este caso tenemos una buena imagen, aunque con un nivel de detalle aceptable, únicamente para videollamadas, pero no esperes grabar videos profesionales con esta cámara. Algo que vamos a notar es que le cuesta hacer los cambios para ir exponiendo de mejor manera el rostro, y podrías llegar a necesitar un poco más de tiempo en que la imagen se vaya adaptando para que se vea bien, pero incluso en condiciones de baja iluminación y contraluz tenemos un resultado positivo. Y en el escenario más oscuro en el que suelo hacer las pruebas de estas cámaras vamos a notar mucho más ruido presente, pero creo que simplemente si enciendes la iluminación artificial vamos a tener una mejor exposición del rostro.
As for the software, we don't have too many surprises. It comes with Windows 11, so it will look a lot like other computers on the market in this respect. Windows 11 is a considerably good operating system. Obviously, if you have a computer that cannot upgrade to Windows 11, you will certainly enjoy a very interesting upgrade. Let me just highlight a few tools that you might find useful. For example, when you are typing either in Word or in any other application, you could simply press Windows H and this will enable a narrator so that you can dictate absolutely all the text and the computer will automatically type everything for you. I think the performance is positive. What could improve this dictation would be the punctuation marks, because in this case it seems that it is not able to recognize well when I pause to put a comma or when I pause a little longer to put a semicolon or something similar. Overall, I think Windows dictation could still use some improvement, but it is a tool that can be useful. Notice how it does an animation where it looks like the paragraph is getting very short but then finishes the typing. Only I insist that the punctuation marks do not appear. If you press Windows Shift S, we are also going to be able to have the tool to make screenshots in a quite comfortable way. Although, as I had already anticipated, also the keyboard comes with a special button that is on the F1's key, so you can launch this screenshot tool quite easily. As part of Windows once, there is also Microsoft Clipchamp, which is a video editor that Microsoft acquired so that it can be integrated in Windows. So if you want to edit a basic video, you could access this editor without the need to buy another editor, although you should know that it lets you edit in a basic format. But if you want to export in 4K and have many more tools, you are going to have to pay a subscription in case you require it. But this software, I insist, that other computers that also have Windows 11 have it. The remarkable thing about Asus is that they include an application called My Asus, where they add some interesting options. For starters, they will give you a configuration section where you can have a few more options. Some I've already told you about, others I'm going to tell you about in a moment, but we do have a nice settings section so you can customize your experience in a much easier way. You could also get to run diagnostics to find out if something is wrong with your computer, and you can keep the drivers updated. This can be quite useful so you know that the drivers are downloaded from official sites. You could also connect Asus displays or also routers from this company to have an even more complete experience. They will also suggest 2 additional Asus applications that can complement the experience. Let me first show you GliveX, which will allow you to connect to your cell phone and also allow you to interact in a good way. To begin with, you need to install GliveX on your phone, and the first time setup process can be a bit complex. Although the advantage is that this application can be installed on any cell phone of any brand, not necessarily an Asus cell phone, and that's the magic. So, notice how we can have multiple options. The first one is symmetry, with which we can have a mirror of our cell phone screen on our computer. Notice how we simply initiate the linking and accept. Although, as I say, the first time you make these connections, you will be asked for several permissions. So you must have good knowledge in the management of the Android operating system to enable each of these permissions. That can become very complex, but once you get it, see how you can manipulate the phone directly from the computer. We will even notice that we can enable a cursor inside the phone, although the process may take a little longer than I would like. But you can control your cell phone from the computer, although let me insist a little more that the configuration process is quite complex. Another connection option between the computer and the cell phone would be the extender option, which will work for you to use your cell phone as an external monitor. Let me show you in this case on a slightly larger screen how it works, because it acts just as if you had another monitor and wirelessly. So, for example, I'm going to move this content to my other monitor and see how the content is present there. I can even use the touch screen of my cell phone or my tablet to use the Windows elements. So it could also become useful, and I like that it is not necessarily with a device of the same brand. And finally, we would also have another option here, which is to unify control, so that from the computer you can even enter the cursor to the cell phone, which is something a little less common, but you could do it anyway. In this case, I have the cursor on the computer, and the cell phone imagines that it is placed on the right side. Only for the purposes of the video, I have it on the left side. But if I slide my cursor to the right and it goes off the screen, it will automatically enter the cell phone. I don't know if you can tell, but here I have the cursor. I'm going to open, for example, an application and see how I could get to select text directly from the computer trackpad. So you can get to have certain options, although it doesn't support gestures. So I feel like it's not really as useful an experience as we would like, but there is the option. We can also send and receive files wirelessly without much complication. Notice, I'm going to send an audio recording and I'm going to select send to other devices, select nearby device, and in the list I should get this cell phone. I insist that the experience is not totally transparent or very easy, and notice how sometimes it will ask you to enable some permissions, and after that it will work and the file has been transferred. In the same way, I can transfer files from the cell phone to the computer wirelessly without so many complications. I could even answer calls directly from the computer, or something that can also be attractive is sharing my camera. Notice I simply select Connect Device, again give the necessary permissions, and now my cell phone camera will work as a camera connected to the computer, even though there is no wired connection. Let me enter the camera application so you can see how, in addition to the camera that comes integrated to the computer, I could use this other camera that offers me much better quality. So if you want to improve your video calls, you could have this experience since the camera is detected by any other application you have in Windows. Notice the difference. This is the built-in camera and this is my cell phone camera, which obviously looks much higher quality. So it's very nice to have this option to use the camera on your phone, and finally we have the remote access option to view all the files on your phone directly on the computer, but for that you need an Asus account. So that's the GlideX application, which gives you a kind of ecosystem, although not necessarily with Asus cell phones. So I liked it, but the setup process is complex. And finally, the Screen Experts app is also going to allow us to manage some things. One of the most useful is the management of windows, because Windows by default has an option to split your screen into multiple distributions, but also with Asus you could drag this window and move it to the floating icon to automatically distribute the applications in this format. Although having a not so high resolution on this screen, it could get to look very crowded if you have several applications open in this format, so it is not so recommended in this aspect. With regards to security, there is nothing that we can really highlight because it doesn't have a fingerprint reader, nor does it have facial recognition that is compatible with Windows Hello. So it really offers very few security options, and Asus doesn't add any special software to improve security either. So really, in this sense, I feel that the experience is pretty basic. Next, we talk about the battery, which has a capacity of 50 watt-hours. That is a battery that is within what one would expect in a device of this price. You already know that I do various battery tests, and in the case of computers, I run this application called Quick CPU Stress Tester that you can install from the Microsoft Store. It's an application that's going to run the full power of the processor using all of its cores. So with this application running, I managed 2.5 hours of usage. So I could tell you that a totally extreme and intense usage would hold you for 2.5 hours. But that would mean, for example, exporting a video at full throttle or playing a fairly heavy game constantly. But doing much simpler activities like watching a YouTube video in full HD with one of brightness and one of volume, I got about 5.5 hours. So obviously it will depend a lot on you as a user, what you are going to use your computer to know how long the battery will last, but it is not very remarkable in this section. Possibly you will need to carry the charger everywhere, but in this case the advantage is that it is a relatively compact and fairly lightweight charger. So, it is not heavy, it is not cumbersome, but I would like to have the folding plug to be able to transport it more easily, and also that the cable could be removed, since in this case it comes completely glued to the connector. So we could say that it is a comfortable and uncomfortable charger at the same time. This charger offers us fast charging. So in 15 minutes it recovered 26% of the energy, and that in computers is something quite remarkable because in computers they usually charge much slower. In 30 minutes it got up to 44%, although after that it can get a little slower charging, so the full charge was finished in 2.5 hours. But it is appreciated that it does have an option to recover energy with short charges. And to take care of the battery also within the My Asus application comes with a good section within the settings, as it brings a battery care mode that will allow you to limit the load to 80%. So if you are one of those people who will have your computer constantly plugged into the power, you should enable this option so that the battery does not degrade so quickly. And if at some point you need to charge it to 100%, you can enable this option, and just for one time it's going to allow the charge to go to 100%. So I think it's a good way to take care of the battery that not all laptop manufacturers add. Although it is becoming more and more common, that's why I highlight the fact that this computer does have it. Next, we are coming to the performance test. I tell you that it has the AMD Ryzen 5 7520U processor running at 2.8 GHz. Note that in this case, it is in the maximum performance profile. Because remember that in Windows, most computers will vary greatly in performance depending on the profile you have selected. In this case, the computer is unplugged from the power, so with the maximum performance profile, we are going to run this test inside the browser. I'm going to open several web pages that I was previously selecting and see how they are loading relatively fast. It doesn't seem like the most powerful computer I've seen, obviously because we're talking about a mid-range computer, but I think the performance it achieves can be good. What's noteworthy here is that it has 8 GB of RAM, which is LPDDR5. So the capacity as such is not so remarkable, but the speed that this RAM reaches can definitely become very remarkable. So notice how even with multiple tabs open in the browser, I have lost absolutely no performance. I'm going to keep scrolling through these pages so you can see more or less how this computer works, and I insist that I think it's going to give us a good experience. I'll just remind you that having a 16:9 ratio screen robs you of a little bit of vertical space, so you may feel like you're missing a little bit of room to work with. That's why I was telling you that the screen is very much geared towards consuming videos or multimedia content, but note how its performance is acceptable. I would not say it is something ultra spectacular, but I think you can get to perform well for various types of tasks. For example, for students, I think it would be an option that will perform well. With those 10 tabs that I have open, notice that we have practically full RAM, but anyway, we are going to open even more applications to see if we can take it to the extreme. Some applications I'm going to move them to a new desktop just so I can switch between them more easily, and now let's test how it's working. RAM is at 95% according to the Windows Task Manager, and notice here we have the PowerPoint application, and it does seem to be running smoothly enough. Let's go to another one, and here we have Excel also with a slightly large file, and it seems to be running fine. Now I'm on the Word desktop, and we seem to have considerably good performance as well. Over here we did see some sort of white screen pops when loading the content of the document, but nothing really too serious. And finally, I still have the browser tabs here, and you can see that they all seem to be running. We haven't seen any restarts or anything like that. So I insist the RAM memory is possibly another of these strengths of the computer. Not so much for the capacity, but for the speed that it can reach. The storage is another of the highlights because it has 512 gigabytes of solid-state storage, so it is a storage that also offers us good speed and in this case good capacity. We are going to be able to install various applications, even games, and have various documents, and the computer is still going to have enough free space. I think that's a good thing, and if you are more into benchmarks, in this case I ran Cinebench, and something curious that I noticed is that contrary to what happens in other computers, in this case when plugged into the power, the computer actually loses performance. For example, multi-core plugged in gave me a result of 3,202 points, but unplugged it reached up to 4,395. And in the case of single core, plugged in it reached 786 points and unplugged it reached 1106. So it is quite curious and peculiar that this computer actually increases its performance when it is not connected to the power, something very strange that I had not seen in other devices. But now let's go to our traditional application opening test. We're going to open 10 apps and we're going to see how long it takes. We'll do an unplugged test and a plugged-in test to see if those benchmark numbers translate into reality. So I'm going to start with this test in the browser, the App Store, then I'm going to open some apps from the Office suite, and it looks like it's not as fast as we'd like it to be, but I don't consider it to stall for very long either. In this case, the simple applications have already finished opening, and now we come to much more complex applications such as Adobe Lightroom. Now we are going to open Adobe Photoshop and lastly Premiere, but let's wait for it to finish opening this application first. It looks like it's finished and I'm now on to the next application, and finally I'm gonna go to the Premiere application. So it's still getting to take a little bit longer on these complex applications, so it's definitely not a high-performance computer. Anyway, we're going to wait until this whole process is over to give you a totally accurate number, and I don't want to cut the recording so that in real time you'll be able to see how much performance it can achieve. All that's left is to open Adobe Premiere Pro, and we're going to stop our timer, or our stopwatch rather, when this test is over. It still seems to be taking quite a while to open Premiere, so for simple applications I think it's going to be an agile enough computer, but it's very clear that for more complex applications like video editing, photo editing or something similar, it's definitely going to take a lot more work. It's still at the point where it's not done yet, and we're already going over a minute and a half to go before it finishes opening this application, and it looks like it's about to get there. Anyway, it looks like the apps running in the background are also having some problems, and we're finally going to get to finish this. I hope so, but not yet. That's it. It practically took 11 seconds on average to open each of these applications, showing us that this is definitely not the most powerful computer we've ever seen. In fact, I want to make a correction because I actually opened 9 applications and not 10, so it took 12.4 seconds on average to open each one. Definitely not a nimble computer. I just plugged it into the power and look how we are going to have the maximum performance mode here as well. This profile is already selected, and within the My Asus application, you can also select a fan performance profile. So notice how it's also set to performance mode. So we have the highest setting enabled. Next, we're going to repeat this test. Although it's probably also going to load a little bit faster because applications might have been cached, but we're going to finish the test completely to verify if indeed the plugged-in performance is lower. At this point, we are already getting to the more complex applications. Personally, I perceive more speed, but the moment of truth has arrived because these applications take quite a long time to open. Although it seems that in this case it is opening a little faster than we expected. Now we are inside Photoshop and we are about to open Adobe Premiere. So from my point of view, when it's plugged into the power, it's going to give us more power, at least in terms of opening applications. So the benchmark is a little bit of a misleading result from my point of view. But let's finish opening absolutely all the applications before giving that conclusion. For now, there is only one app left to finish opening and we will be finishing our test. It still seems to be taking a little longer. This Adobe Premiere application is the one that is taking this computer the longest. It is taking several seconds on this part. It looked like it was just about done, but it went on to take much longer opening this complex application. But it looks like it's almost done. Plugged in, it took 9.5 seconds on average to open each application. So, yes, there is an improvement in performance from this point of view. Next, we're going to close all the applications and stay with Adobe Premiere only so we can see how long it takes to export a video. As usual, here is our video stitching together 4 clips recorded at 4K. The workflow looks quite slow, confirming that this computer does not have that much power for this kind of tasks that require much more graphics power, as it only has AMD Radeon integrated graphics. So, it does not have a dedicated graphics card. We're going to export this video with the H.264 codec with the default settings that Adobe Premiere already comes with, as we always do. And in this case, it's plugged into the power. Let's see how long it takes to finish this export process. As you can see, it took 1 minute and 55 seconds. So it's definitely not a computer that I'm going to recommend if you're going to be working in video editing. It's definitely going to be very weak in this regard. Finally, let's talk about games. In this case, remember that it has the Xbox game bar and various tools. I first ran Minecraft, and in this case we moved absolutely nothing from the default video settings, but I want you to see more or less the options that were enabled. Notice that we had unlimited maximum frames and anti-aliasing on 4. It should be noted that even recording the screen can maintain very similar performance, so yes, you could record the screen to record some gameplays, although the quality of the screen recording is not that high. But I must say that we have a good experience. In this case, it is not such a complex game, so you could perfectly run this content on this computer, both plugged and unplugged. Because plugged in it averaged 50 frames per second, 60 as the highest peak, 2 as the lowest peak. So we definitely have something considerably good in this game, which is simple obviously. While it was unplugged from the power, the performance I must say did drop, especially in the stability because the average wasn't that low, being 44 frames per second, but it did get to much lower stability, so there was a lot more fluctuations. But anyway, even unplugged, you can still get to have good gameplay on this kind of content that's still basic. I also ran the Zoticon game, and as you can see, the graphics settings were set to high quality by default, albeit with HD resolution. So we kept these settings simply to not give it such a heavy test for being a simple computer. And I must say that it gives us a considerably good experience. It doesn't get too hot, the graphics look good. Obviously this is still not such a complex game, but it does have good graphics, good animations. You don't really notice any problems while playing. The only thing to note is that it will not allow you to play with a very high resolution and overly complex visual effects. But even so, I personally find it a good experience playing this type of content. And unplugged from the power, recording the screen, we could say that yes, there are some moments where it comes to cost, especially when making some stronger transitions in the graphics of the game, but still gives a good experience. It does not freeze completely, so you can play this content if you are not a totally demanding gamer. And finally, in Gears note that by default it gives us several settings in low quality, obviously, since it doesn't have a dedicated graphics card. So we are not going to find here very advanced special effects or anything like that. The recommended settings will obviously be very simple. And with this configuration, we only had 13 frames per second on average, so it's definitely not a remarkable experience for gamers. The highest peak was 32 and the lowest was 4, so we also found a lot of fluctuations and very low stability. Therefore, I would not recommend this computer if your priority is to play this kind of content. Even though it can run them, but it's going to run them with very simple graphics, and even in very simple graphics, we're not going to find very good fluidity. So it is definitely not a computer for this type of users. The curious thing in this case is that when plugged in, the power was a little worse. In this case, it seems that it did reflect what I had told you previously that we saw in the benchmarks. Since while it was unplugged, it gave us 19 frames per second on average, so it did a little better, but either way, it is still an experience with very low stability, very low peak times of 4 frames per second, so it's not going to be a computer I'd recommend for gaming. I must say that the fans do a considerably good job, as at times the computer reached something close to 45 degrees Celsius, but after a few seconds of pausing the game, the computer was able to regain a good 37 degrees Celsius temperature. So the cooling is good, but still not a dedicated gamer's computer. And with this, we have reached the end of this video review. I hope you liked it and you have been able to know everything about this computer. For the moment, we have reached the end. If you liked the video, you know you can indicate it, and we will see you next time.